Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
Media Podcast Network presents This is Protecting America. Now, here's Emmy-winning journalist Rita Cosby.
Welcome to another edition of Protecting America. I'm Rita Cosby. The dismal Biden administration U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan was pathetic and certainly left a big scar, a big black eye on America from our allies and well beyond. And this week, there was a major congressional hearing that took place and still a lot of unanswered questions. And joining us now to talk about all of this is retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel, also DOD Intel officer, also president of Project Sentinel, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. Tony, great to have you here.
Rita, it's always a pleasure to join you. Thanks for having me.
What was the big takeaway you thought from the congressional hearings this week?
Well, there was two. First, ultimately, if you sort through all of the drama, is the Afghan debacle was a policy failure. Over and over, Rita, they outlined how plans were created, discussions were done, and ultimately the policy was to not permit the military to do its job. Yeah, that was the root cause. And secondly, faced with the fact that these policies were going to result in failure, those who did the planning and plans were rejected failed to basically be courageous and be willing to support their convictions that they should not do the operations because they're going to fail. And those generals, the primary one, General Mark Milley, who's chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and Gregory McKenzie.
Yep, General Keith McKenzie, Keith Frank McKenzie.
Yeah, and so they admitted that, we kind of knew it was going to fail, but we did it anyway. And so those are the two big things. Generals lacked the courage of their convictions, and the policy was going to fail. And, oh, by the way, one of the notable things that came out of the hearing today is my friend Joe Wilson, Congressman Wilson, noted that the White House, Joe Biden, had said in their internal report that they were constricted to the Trump agreement. I mean, you'd think, Rita, that Donald Trump was looking over their shoulder constantly and trying to correct them. You think he was in a room with them. It was insanity. And within the context of that, Joe Wilson said, as a matter of policy, he asked the White House for those letters. Give me the letters that say these generals recommend that you do all this. And, of course, no letter showed up. And the generals confirmed today that they did not give such advice to the White House to just abandon Afghanistan. They gave the opposite advice. And I think that's something all Americans need to recognize, that even with the best military advice available, President Biden then decided to go a completely opposite direction. And he himself bears the responsibility for both the Afghan debacle and the current downward spiral of national security within the context of the United States.
You know, you talked about with the best military advice. It was reiterated that they said we should keep 2,500 U.S. troops there. We should keep Bagram. Talk about how important that was. And still today, as you point out, the president has said, no, I wasn't told we should keep that, which is obviously in direct contrast to what these generals and others have said.
Right. So I was involved with Mike Pompeo. Mike and I didn't agree on every point of what they were doing. We actually yelled at each other on the phone one time, and I'll admit that. And I think Mike would be honest about that, too. But the overall plan that they'd come up with was essentially a diplomatic solution to reintegrate the Taliban into the diplomatic process, the democratic process of Afghanistan. That was the plan. That was the objective. So what happened was there was a number of things which were proposed. One of those things was maintaining a level of presence at Bagram Air Base, and I was stationed at Bagram most of my time in Afghanistan. It's a well-defended area that you could launch airstrikes all over the nations there, all around the region. And maintaining essentially a special operations contingent and an intelligence collection contingent, and just keep them there indefinitely. And that element, that military element with lethal capability, lethal force, would be used to enforce the conditions-based withdrawal. That's the important thing, conditions-based withdrawal from Afghanistan. That is to say that we would be there to oversee that process of the reintegration of the Taliban into some level of working with the Afghan government. That piece failed. As a matter of fact, Rita, that piece failed because Biden didn't want to hear it. And those plans were clear. They were very well thought. A lot of folks, and even that was alluded to today, most of the folks within the intelligence and Pentagon establishment recommended it, and it was ignored. So it's that fact that is beyond reproach that at this point that everybody who really thought this through recognized that Bagram was key in maintaining some level of special operations and other military force there with lethal capability was critical. And again, that was something that was instantly scoffed at and removed by Biden.
Do you think Biden was so anxious to live up to the deadline in his mind? Okay, I want to have them out by the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And no matter what his military people were going to tell him, he was basing it all on politics.
I'm convinced of that. Absolutely. Everything that's been done by this White House, especially lately, is all focused on how they anticipate they would like to have aspirations of affecting domestic politics. And people like Tony Blinken are at the heart of this, Jake Sullivan. Literally, this is like having a high school debating team that think that they're the smartest people in the school dictating policy to people who are actually professionals who understand how to get things done. And the results are catastrophic and repeated. And the repeated effects of this has been to not only not affect domestic politics. I think most people now see what's going on, and it's been called out over and over. That is, the White House has. It is resulting in a diminution of confidence by our allies and an expanded, more aggressive posture of our enemies. So it's really the worst of all worlds. The idea that we have academics who have little to no real world experience telling President Biden to do and take certain actions which have resulted in catastrophic and sustained failure across the board, somehow thinking that this is going to affect positively their chances for reelection. And obviously, one of the things I went on record for in a number of programs is that there would be no bump out of the State of the Union, because most people recognize now that what Biden does, what he says, only is essentially trying to affect the perception of his political fortitude, while in reality, people recognize the weakness that actually comes out of what he does.
Well, we're seeing it also with Israel, Tony. I mean, you look at what's been happening in the last few days. I mean, we've heard Chuck Schumer suddenly come out and say, okay, there needs to be a leadership change, new elections there. And it seems everything is on getting the votes in Minnesota and Michigan. And there's a lot of Arab Americans there, right?
Right. So, yeah, the Chuck Schumer thing, for your audience to understand, was completely approved and endorsed by the White House. First off, John Kirby, the spokesman for the National Security Council, acknowledged this before Biden did, saying, yeah, Chuck Schumer called over and told us what he was going to do. And then Biden himself confirmed it. So what they've done is they've taken members of Congress, members of their own administration of Jewish faith, and literally selling the Jewish people down the river, literally. There's no way to put a fine point on this, Rita, that you have essentially people so desperate to maintain political power, no matter what the cost, that they're literally willing to engage in a bloodbath. And I'll use the word in the correct context in this case, a bloodbath which would see more Jews killed by terrorist organizations at the price of their own political benefit domestically. That's how insane this is.
Yeah, and I think about how different it would be if they were 100% supporting our great ally Israel, not telling them to back off at every turn. Here, they're still about to go into Rafah. They're trying to eradicate Hamas, and then they have America throwing them under the bus. What's the consequence of that?
Well, that's the issue. I mean, at this point, the quickest point, I've said this a number of times, I think we've talked about it before, the quickest way to help the people of the West Bank is to end the war. You win the war by victory. You achieve victory by engaging in very aggressive, very quick operations. So this whole construct, think about the amount of resources going into this dock they want to build. They want to put all these resources into it. And who's going to secure it? Who's going to man it? Where's the food going to go? Is the food's going to go to the same place it goes now, which is into the hands of Hamas, who then starves their own people? It's insane. The quickest way, to your point, is allowing for the Israelis, the IDF, to do its job, do it quickly, and be done with it. And the more that the Biden administration puts pressure to slow them down, the more the Biden administration prolongs the hardship and pain of the Palestinian people.
America's beverage companies are investing in America. We're American companies, making American products with American workers in America's hometowns. We're local bottlers and manufacturers, operating in all 50 states, employing more than 275,000 Americans in good-paying jobs, delivering for the nation, because we believe in the promise of America and the people who make it great. Learn more at WeDeliverForAmerica.org. Paid for by the American Beverage Association.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply. This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
My name is Lily, and I've had hidradenitis suppurativa, HS, for years. I finally found some relief since taking Cosentyx. Relief means I can show up more.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for adults with moderate to severe hidradenitis suppurativa, HS. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some are fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your dermatologist about Cosentyx.
Let's get back to Afghanistan, too, because it really epitomizes. You look at the poll numbers after Afghanistan, President Biden tanked. He has never come up. What message does that send to you? I think the American public looks at the withdrawal from Afghanistan. They remember the thousands of Afghanis running down, trying to chase the last plane out, clinging for their lives. And clearly it has hurt this president. I mean, they see that it was disastrous. There's no way to get around it.
Well, and more importantly, Rita, today, beyond that, there was an acknowledgement that those who helped us, the Afghan nationals and some dual citizens, are still being hunted down by the Taliban. That actually came out in testimony today, that this isn't over. The terror that started 2 years ago when this happened still continues for some people on the ground there, and it's unconscionable. And I think most people recognize that by the bad policy, the ignoring of military advice, the ignoring of intelligence warnings, has resulted in this continued travesty that we've seen result in the Afghanistan issues. And at this point, there's no end to it. Well, the only end to it, as far as I'm concerned, is when Biden leaves the White House, because otherwise they're going to continue to obfuscate, to try to not provide all the information that they need. That is, the Pentagon will not provide all the information it has to the members of Congress. The Biden administration will not actually account for its actions. They're still trying to deny the very facts that were on display today. And ultimately, it's going to result in a continued belief by our enemies that Biden is weak, that Biden will make decisions which will benefit them and harm our allies and the American people. And that's what others are going to act on. They're going to act on the perception of weakness that Biden continues to display.
Talk about also some of the stunning testimony that came out in the congressional hearing, because one of the really amazing moments I thought was from a U.S. sniper, and it's a sergeant who said that he had the bomber, the suicide bomber there at Abbey Gate in his sights, because there was a be on the lookout for this individual. And he said, I see him, I have him in my sights. He's sending intel up to his commanders saying, can I take the shot? Let's take him out. And he gets no reply. And to this day, we don't know why he's gotten no reply. That was stunning.
General McKenzie, the commander of Central Command, was asked about this specifically. And his answer was not good. He said basically, well, the rules of engagement, the ROE, were standard, with some level of add-on for Afghanistan. And while he didn't know the specifics of this, he did say that, under all ROE, which is what I functioned under and many of the operations I was on, that our soldiers have the quote-unquote inherent right of self-defense. Now, that's where it breaks down, because somewhere between McKenzie and his belief that the rules of engagement were sufficient was an execution a set of orders which prevented that soldier from doing the very thing that McKenzie said he had the right to do. That's what we need to focus on. And by the way, there was no actual additional light shed on this, even though there were families there who lost loved ones at the Abbey Gate. I think there were two of the veterans of that event there at the hearing today. There was no clarification of how that happened, and this is what's dangerous. And I know Congressman McCall, Chairman McCall said, the purpose of the hearing was to prevent this from happening again. Rita, it's going to happen again because you have a chain of command that is compromised and doesn't really care to get to the bottom of this. And one quick side note on this, the only person who actually suffered the consequences of the failure was Colonel Stu Schiller, Lieutenant Colonel Stu Schiller, Marine Corps Colonel, who witnessed this, who went public and said he witnessed everything we're talking about, and yet instead of the chain of command acknowledging he's correct, they went after him, they court-martialed him. I actually participated as a witness in his defense at his court-martial here in North Carolina. And so to date, the only person who lost their pension, who has been excoriated, is the guy who stood up and said, hey, the rules of engagement weren't correctly enforced, and people died because of that. So imagine that. The guy who said the right thing, who was a whistleblower, is the guy that paid the consequence of the incompetence of the generals above him.
Should the generals, like General Milley and General McKenzie, who were in charge of Afghanistan, should they have resigned if they knew that they had told the president something different and he wasn't doing it, and it would put Americans and our allies in grave danger?
That is the correct and textbook answer given at schools, Rita. I mean, that's what we are trained to do as commissioned officers, to basically be willing to resolve yourself to doing the right thing, even if doing so requires the courage to go against the policy, to say, I can't do this, it's going to result in failure. Now, whether you like him or not, a lieutenant general named Greg Newbold did this very thing before the invasion of Iraq. And I know Greg. I actually had to work with him when he was the director of the Joint Staff. He was the director of the Joint Staff when the planning started for the invasion of Iraq. I and others were very skeptical of the plan, still am. And Newbold said, I can't do this. I don't believe that the ultimate objectives that are being assigned to the Pentagon are in our interest, and I'm going to retire. And it didn't change the trajectory of the invasion. I think in this case, if you had if you had actually McKenzie and Milley both stand up as officers with great experience saying, I can't do this, and resign, there was a strong potential that would have changed the trajectory of the outcome that we now see. And they didn't have that courage, Rita. They didn't have that courage because they felt their career and their own personal interests were greater than those of the members of the military that served under them, or the interests and success of this nation going forward.
You think about how different it could have been if they had gone public and said, we disagree with this. We care about our troops. We don't want to do this. We have vocalized how catastrophic it is, not just to Americans, our allies. We think it's going to implode. Think about how different. It might have had a tremendous difference in the trajectory, and it would have been a huge public embarrassment, and at least it would have put a pause on what maybe Biden was planning to do.
Absolutely. And that's the issue. This was not a potential. It was predictable. It was forecast that if you don't follow the guidelines and actually worked to establish points of progress that are measured against the standards you set forth regarding the Doha Agreement, and they admitted today, by the way, Rita, that the Taliban weren't standing up to the Doha Agreement requirements.
Yeah,
so
they said they almost hadn't lived up to any of them, any of the elements of it, right?
But according to the Biden administration, our hands were quote unquote tied to the Doha Agreement. No, they weren't. The moment Trump stepped down on the 20th of January of 2021, Biden was the guy. And though they could have changed any number of rules, requirements, or negotiations, this was not Trump's fault. This is squarely at the feet of Joe Biden. And all these obfuscations, all these excuses are lies, flat out lies, provable lies. And yes, the trajectory should have been changed because, again, the moment they gave up Bagram, they gave up all potential for leverage of any sort regarding offensive military operations to protect our troops, the diplomats, and the Americans on the ground there.
And also that suicide bomber at Abbey Gate that took 13 precious lives of our U.S. service members, the men and women, he came from Bagram, right? He was in the Bagram prison. I mean, my goodness.
And they tried to blame the release of prisoners on Trump. It's like, no, it wasn't Trump. This is what I find so fascinating, Rita, that they will constantly try to use Trump as their excuse for their own failure. It's insane. And yes, the negotiations, Khalilzad was negotiating on behalf of Biden, and the Biden administration allowed for the opening of that prison. It was Biden. And nobody that on our side that I know of during the Trump negotiations even contemplated that they would do that. So, no, he was one of the guys who came out and was set up to do what he did. And, oh, by the way, I think the Taliban were fully aware of what was going on, even though they acknowledged today also, McKinsey acknowledged that they were passing intelligence to the Taliban. So there you go.
What do you know of the stories, too, of where people say that Trump let out X amount of prisoners? That was before, right? And they were Taliban. Talk about the context of that.
So the context of that was there were some prisoners that the Taliban felt, and the Afghan government did confirm that they felt that they were able to be reinsinuated into society. Not everybody, just some. And so there was some effort to go through and do essentially a review and release of these individuals. I wasn't part of it, but that was something that was ongoing before the event. This guy was not part of that negotiation, as far as I know, the suicide bomber. This was when they just opened the doors and let everybody out. So I'm familiar with that facility. I've been in that facility at Bagram. There were some really bad folks there, but part of this also was we had no place to put them. As you know, the Democrats have been pushing to shut down Gitmo for years now. And so for some of these guys who, like this guy, was a radical guy who would never be essentially reintegrated, there was no place to put him. And so they kept him there at Bagram, and obviously the end result was releasing the worst of the worst back into play, if you will, and going and doing the horrible things that happened on that in that attack on Abbey Gate.
One of the worst decisions of Afghanistan, on top of some of these others, is that we left billions of dollars of U.S.-made equipment. Talk about how dangerous that is and how that was reconfirmed.
This was a frustrating point today when I watched this. So they were saying that is Millie and McKenzie, that no, this was gear that was Afghan gear. It's like, yeah, but it's our gear.
Yeah, our gear given to them. Right. By the way, did you notice they were making the distinction of what was in U.S. control versus what was U.S. made given to Afghan? It was parsing words. Right.
Yeah. So the answer is we could have done a lot more to destroy or make sure it was unusable before we left. And the decision was to not do that. What they didn't say is when they directed retrograde, they just basically walked away. I've talked to folks who were involved in that, Rita. Literally, the order came down. It's like, just leave. It's like, excuse me? Like, just leave. They could have taken at least a month and gone through and done a thorough review and destruction of military equipment that they thought would be unserviceable. The other issue here, this is a little bit of a left turn for you, but I think it's important to the point. The Afghan army never existed. This vaunted 100,000+ man thing was never there. We knew it. I had whistleblowers and my friends. Danny Davis testified to the fact that all of this phony baloney training, they would train people. They would be the Afghan military would be reporting, there's 10 men reporting to one. These were all fake guys just taking the money we were giving them and pretending that they had an army. It was never going to work. And that was one of the other fictions that was presented to everybody as truth. It was a lie. And we made a mistake early by not supporting the Afghan militia forces. We won the initial entry into Afghanistan by working with militia who hated the Taliban as much as we did. We should have stuck to that formula. It would not have resulted in a catastrophe we saw. But with that said, what they failed to do is actually account for those weapon systems that we gave Afghanistan. And as soon as we recognize that, hey, these things are going to be falling into the hands of the enemy, they did nothing to go back and destroy them. We could have done multiple airstrikes. Talk about something that would have sent a message. We could have sent B-52s over like we did back in 2001 and 2002 and wiped out all this stuff. You could give them a warning, say, hey, by the way, we're going to bomb this spot because, we're not going to let you keep that gear. But they chose not to do that. By the way, we did the same thing with ISIS. Obama had opportunity after opportunity to take out ISIS as it swept through Iraq. They did nothing. They did the same thing here. They did nothing to prevent the fall of all these very expensive weapons into the hands of the Taliban.
And finally, Tony, we just have a few seconds left. What's the message to Gold Star families? I kept thinking as I was watching the hearing, what's going on in their mind? How just painful and difficult and still so many unanswered questions.
Many of us sign up for the right reasons, and the warriors who lost their lives signed up because they love this country, and the love of country should be that which is remembered for their service. They should be remembered for their bravery and for their sacrifice to the nation. And simply put, they did the right thing while others did not, and that's what we should honor.
Yeah, absolutely. And boy, did they make the ultimate sacrifice. It's incredible. Their heroism, the family's heroism, too. It's important to always remember. Everybody, be sure to subscribe and share to this podcast. And Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, thank you for your great service to this country and also just your great insights. It's really great to have you here. It's so important. Thank you, Tony.
Oh, thank you, Rita. Always great to join you.
And everybody, I'll be back soon with another great edition of Protecting America. And of course, you can catch me every weeknight, 10 p.m. to midnight on the legendary WABC Radio. This is Rita Cosby, and thanks for all you do to protect America.